Hi, my name is Shazia Khan, and the Principles of Criminal Law is the unit that we're doing, and the assignment discussion session is what we carried on from. So the last recording is the assignment discussion session that we did, and it went off. So I'm just carrying on from task one, what we discussed. So we were discussing task one. If you can see this is the assignment brief that we were discussing, and it was a scenario in regards to Amir and Josh, and we were looking at the elements of whether there was actus reus, mens rea, and whether there was a classification of violent offences that occurred with Amir, Josh, and getting on with the assignment. And now we're looking at the second set of recordings. So both recordings are assignment discussion sessions. So we were on the element of the classification of violent offences, and we looked at whether there was assault occurred, battery or recklessness or intention or GBH or ABH in regards to Amir's situation, and if there were any forms of criminal negligence. We then went on to look at the general defences that will be available, if any. So the self-defence, Amir in this case could claim that his actions were self-defence and he felt threatened by Josh in this scenario. He could also look at that Josh was laughing, and it was unlikely that Amir could justify his actions as self-defense because it was a jokey thing. Provocation was the next one, where Amir may argue that he was provoked by the missed goal and Josh's laughter. However, while provocation may reduce the severity of the offence, it is not typically absolve someone from the responsibility of an offence. Like assault or reckless injury, unless the provocation was severe enough to cause an immediate violent reaction. Voluntary intoxication may be one that I could use, where Amir was drinking all morning, which affects his ability to form the requisite mens rea. However, voluntary intoxication is generally not a defence of basic intent. It might only be considered in cases where there's specific intent crimes. And this is looking at elements of learning outcome 1, 2, and 4 in regards to this. So you will be looking at the learning outcomes and the slides in regards to this. The other one that you could maybe argue is mistake of fact, that Amir could claim that he didn't intend to hit Rai, that he had mistakenly threw the bottle. But since throwing a bottle in anger could be seen as reckless, this defense in his case would unlikely to succeed. So he's going to be really careful with elements of that. And then also the next one is, which you've got to look at, is insanity or diminished responsibility, and refer it to the scenario. In this case, if Amir's drinking led him to a state where he could not understand the nature of his actions or lacked control, he could claim a defense based on insanity or diminished responsibility. However, in this instance, intoxication, because he was so drunk, alone is not generally enough to invoke his defense unless there are specific mental health issues. So you've got to take into account, when you're looking at this scenario of Amir, Josh, and Rai, you've got to take in the mens rea, the actus rea requirements of criminal offences, and you've got to look at the classification of offences. So you look at assault, battery, recklessness, GBH, ABH, criminal negligence, and the general defences to criminal conduct in regards to Amir and Josh and Rai's case. You could look at it in the element of Amir's actions, and him throwing the bottle was reckless behaviour. He could be charged with ABH, as we mentioned, due to the severity of the injury. If it's not that bad, then it could be ABH, but if it's bad, it will be GBH. Rai's injury in this case was unintentional when the bottle missed Amir, but it struck her. Since her arm was fragile due to the recent surgery, her surgery could be categorized as more severe now because him throwing the bottle at her. The facts that Amir's actions caused harm suggest that Amir may be responsible. And there's different elements of assault or battery that could be discussed in this scenario. So it's really important you look at the elements in learning outcome 1, 2, and 4 in regards to recklessness, what type of violent disorder was it, assault, was it intoxication, and advise them accordingly, and advise whether, in this case, maybe Rai could focus, maybe entitled to seek some form of compensation, and how she should, report the incident to the police. And you should argue that Amir could face criminal charges for reckless endangerment, assault, and potentially battery. And Josh is likely to be a witness. Amir, because he's seen cause that distress. And Rai is the victim, and she may be able to get compensation. So you would need to look at learning outcome 1, 2, and 4, and look together at everything: the criminal charges, what offences there are, what general defences would be available, and you would have to argue that for Amir, Josh, and Rai. So that's the first task, and you need to show knowledge and understanding of the subject area. You need to provide references and case law here. So you need to back it up with cases when you talk about a certain offence or a defence, or any element of the criminal damage. You need to support your answers and show that you have wider reading as well. For this task 1, you need to submit in the form of a report written in Word format. The recommended word limit is 1,300 words, excluding diagrams, references, and any appendices. And learners are expected to adhere to the word count, which is a 10% leeway either side of this range, and is permitted before the assessor instructed to stop reading. Now, that is task 1, which is 1,300 words. Now we're going to task 2 of 2. In this, you are looking at learning outcome 3 and learning outcome 4. You're looking at interpreting the legal liability requirements for criminal damage and theft, and you're looking at summarizing general defenses to criminal conduct. Again, this is the scenario. So in this scenario, Frank is at a pub watching the World Cup. He gets frustrated when his team loses and leaves the bar, grabbing a bag off a chair, thinking it was his. He gets halfway down the road when he realizes that it is not his bag. He throws it in a hedge. The bag itself belonged to Ravinda, which contained her wallet and keys to her house. Ravinda has no idea where her bag is. Ravinda goes back to her flat. As she cannot get in, she throws a brick through the window. When she goes to open the door, she realizes that it was the wrong flat and runs away. So this is a scenario about Frank and Ravinda. Here, learners must show knowledge again and understanding of the subject area, provide references to relevant case law and or legislation wherever appropriate, and then also be able to support your answers with reference to cases and extra reading around it. So in this situation, you would look at the legal liability for criminal damage and theft. To establish whether theft existed, you must be able to look at dishonest appropriation of property without the owner's consent, and whether there was actus and mens rea here. So in Frank's actions, actus rea, Frank took the bag that he did not belong to him, which was the first step in the act of theft. Secondly, the mens rea, the mental state. Frank's mental state is important. He grabbed the bag thinking it was his, which indicates lack of dishonest intention. So the mens rea for theft. Dishonesty is a key element of theft, and Frank's mistake may indicate he did not act with the intent to permanently deprive Ravinda of her bag. So, he didn't intentionally do it. Frank did not know the bag belonged to someone else at the time he took it, as he thought it was his, and he later realized his mistake. Since theft requires dishonesty, Frank's actions may not amount to theft because he did not act with the intention to permanently deprive someone of Ravinda of her bag. Frank may not be guilty of theft because he did not have the necessary mens rea, which is dishonesty, at the time of taking the bag. He mistakenly took the wrong bag, which might suggest his actions are not criminal. You know, he didn't have the intention to do it. If it was found that he knew the bag wasn't his, but took it anyway, that could be a different situation, which may be leading to theft charges. Criminal damage could be discussed here. To establish criminal damage, you know, it needs to be looked at the elements of whether the property belonging to another was intentionally or recklessly causing the damage. And in this situation, Ravinder, what was her actions? So Ravinder's physical act, Ravinder threw a brick through a window, which caused damage to the property. The window of a wrong flat in Ravinder's case. Mens rea, the mental state. Ravinder's mental state is a key in determining criminal damage. She intentionally threw the brick at the window, but she did not intend to damage the property of the flat she targeted. She was upset because she couldn't get into her own flat and mistakenly targeted the wrong one. If Ravinder acted recklessly, knowing that throwing the brick could cause damage, she could still be liable for criminal damage. Recklessness means she was aware of the risk of damage but proceeded anyway, which seems to apply by throwing the brick without considering whether it might hit the wrong flat. Ravinder could be liable for criminal damage because she recklessly caused damage to someone else's property, which was the window of the other flat. Even though she mistakenly targeted the wrong flat, her actions were reckless enough to cause damage, and recklessness is sufficient for criminal liability and criminal damage. So Ravinder could be liable. You'd then go on to look at general defences to criminal conduct. Both Ravinder and Frank may consider various defenses depending on the circumstances and the possible defenses. The first one, mistake of fact. Frank might argue mistake of fact defense. He honestly and mistakenly believed the bag was his, which may negate the mens rea, which is dishonesty required for theft. A mistake of fact can be valid defense if the defendant had no intention to commit a crime and was acting under a genuine misunderstanding in Frank's case. Frank's defense, he could claim that that because he mistakenly took the wrong bag, he lacked the intention to steal and therefore did not meet the mental requirements for theft. Then you could look at self-defense, which may not be applicable here. The defense would be useful if someone committed an act in order to protect themselves or others. Duress is a defense which is not applicable in Frank and Ravinder's case. Insanity or mental state. Now, if Frank or Ravinder had a mental disorder at the time of the offence, then this would exist as a defence. Necessity, the defence of necessity would be used when the defendant commits an offence to avoid a greater harm. Neither Frank or Ravinder was acting out of necessity in this case. Consent. So this was not applicable here as well. Consent can be a defense if someone had the property owner's consent to act. Frank did not have Ravinder's consent to take a bag, and Ravinder did not have the consent to damage another person's property. And then provocation, again, it's not an element in this case. While Frank and Ravinder in this case were frustrated, it seems their actions were not deliberate rather than impulsive. So Frank, in this case, he's unlikely to be found guilty of theft due to his honest mistake. And he made an error. Ravinder, she's likely to liable for criminal damage because she recklessly threw a brick through another flat and targeted the wrong flat. Both potentially can raise a mistake of fact, a fact defense in Frank's case, but in Ravinder's case, reckless would likely stand as criminal conduct. So you need to argue the elements in regards to this. So you need to look at mens rea in theft, and also you need to look at mens rea, actus rea for both Frank and for Ravinder, and Ravinder's actions, and then the defenses available. And these will be learning outcome. You need to look at learning outcome 3 and 4 in regards to this, okay? So there are 2 scenarios in the tasks that you need to discuss. The last video showed the first scenario, a little bit like I've discussed now, the general defenses. The second task is this scenario in regards to Frank and Ravinder. The delivery and submission of is a form of document written in Word format for task 2, and the recommended word count is 1,200 words, excluding diagrams, references, and appendices. Learners are expected to adhere to the word count, and a 10% leeway either side of this range is permitted before the instructor is instructed to stop reading. Again, referencing, you should cite a range of case law, and you should be using Harvard system for referencing, which is included at the end of the work. Make sure you do a conclusion, a small conclusion, and a reference list as well. Assignment guidance and support. Make sure you start with an introduction and end with a conclusion, maybe 3 or 4 lines, okay? Make sure you are using Harvard system for referencing, and you can refer to online sites such as CiteMe and Neil's Toolbox. That will help you, and the links there for Neil's Toolbox, and that would help you get together the reference and then put it in your bibliography at the end. If you are using diagrams, please make sure you reference them accordingly. Make sure you have a bibliography reference list, and it's in alphabetical order as well. Make sure it's in alphabetical order so that it is all structured chronologically. Try to use more examples when explaining certain concepts, for example, when looking at theories. Also, in these scenarios, task 1 and 2, you need to be referring to legal cases to back up your point that you make about defences or about actus reus, about mens rea. For both scenarios, you need to be using legal cases. Make sure you're using assessment criteria as a heading. In this case, you have your scenarios that you will be working around. And for the first scenario is 1,300 words. Task 1, task 2 is 1,200 words. You need to be referring to the indicative content and checking your word count all the time. Important points to note: give proper headings and subheadings. Make your document look presentable and professional, and number your figures and diagrams. Make sure you are using English commands and English language rather than American style. Avoid using the Z's in organization, use the S's. Follow the numbering on the assignment presentation against the assignment brief, which I'll show you the assignment brief as well. Ensure at least 12 to 15 references. Again, references should be in Harvard system that we use. Keep a check on your word count plus minus 20% tolerance limit. Word limit, again, in this assignment is 2,500 words. Remember, there's a grading in this assignment, which is pass or a refer. Do not use AI software to write the assignment. There's only 20% tolerance allowed, else it will be considered malpractice. So it needs to be under 20%. And please mention the grade you want. In this case, you won't have to mention it because it's a pass or a refer, okay? Make sure you are not concentrating on using AI because that's plagiarism. Useful tips: read the tasks carefully. So read the scenarios. You have 2 scenarios there. Make sure you read them so you're able to understand what you need to do. Look at the command verbs. Broadly as guidance, command verbs, you cover the tasks by writing, explain, define, describe, 100 to 125 words. Assess, examine, clarify, 175 to 225, and compare, contrast, critically evaluate, 250 to 300 words. Harvard referencing. So referencing needs to be Harvard system, as I've been mentioning throughout. Author, date, style. For example, Slack, Johnston, Brandon Jones, 2011 in the text. In the reference towards the end, it will come as shown as the full citation, which you could get Neil's Toolbox to help you with that. Minimum of 6 references, books, journals in the bibliography. Give proper headings and subheadings. Make sure you are not using bullet points. The work needs to be presentable and professional piece of work. And word count is 2,500 with a 10% leeway both ways. Plagiarism and tolerance must be under 20%. Plenary, you need to make sure you are not copying and pasting your work, as it's plagiarism and would lead to academic misconduct. And I will reiterate this all the time to you because it's so important. You need to move away from copying and pasting your work. Make sure you reference all your sources. Make sure you check your grammar and spelling, which is really, really important. And refer to ebooks and journals on Moodle for this unit. If you are using UK Varsity slides, then the referencing will be shown as below: MDT 2022. In the bibliography, you would put multidisciplinary teams, learning outcome 1, slide number 2 to 10, UK Varsity, published on 15th of January 2023. Any queries or questions you have, you need to email learnerwork@ukvarsity.co.uk, and any submission of your assignment is to be done on learnerwork@ukvarsity.co.uk. Your assignment submission is 2 weeks after the completion of the unit. So now we've completed learning outcome 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they're all recorded and available on Moodle for you. The assignment discussion we've done, and it's in 2 recordings that you could look at, and you have time now to complete the assignment. You have 2 weeks after now to complete the assignment. Right, before I finish the session, I want to show you the assignment brief and what it looks like, so you've got a bit of an idea when you go on to Moodle what that looks like, okay? I've just literally taken everything from the assignment brief and copied it onto these slides for you, so you could have a look at that in your own time as well, okay? So this is the how the assignment brief looks. It goes on with the unit reference number, the unit title, unit level, parts of the grading structure, mandatory or optional, and then the unit aim, and then it looks at the learning outcomes and the assessment criteria for 4 of the learning outcomes. Then it goes on to task 1, which is the Josh and Amir World Cup, the element of the assignment discussion in Josh and Amir, where they hit Rai as well. Sorry, Amir throws a bottle and hits Rai, so you need to advise them. So this is the scenario. You need to advise them of the actors and the men's, the criminal damage, what offence occurred, and general defences that are available. So you need to advise Amir, Josh, and Rai in this situation. You need to use case law, and this is 1,300 words for task 1. The second task is here, which is Frank and Ravinder. And again, you are doing the same thing, but it's an element of theft. Okay, so you're looking at learning outcome 3 and learning outcome 4, where you are advising them on elements of theft, and you are advising them with reference to cases. You are advising them whether there was any actus reus for Frank and any actus mens rea for Frank, the physical act or the mental state, and same for Ravinder with reference to any sort of general defences to any criminal conduct. If there was any criminal conduct if there was any criminal conduct by Frank or by Ravinder. And here you would be looking at the general defences as well, and also looking at the mens rea and actus rea for both. You would need to identify elements of all the cases in both scenarios. You need to provide a knowledge and understanding of the subject area. In Ravinder and Frank's scenario, task 2, it is 1,200 words that you need to look at doing, and the format is in a Word document. You need to show a knowledge and understanding of the subject area. You need to reference relevant cases that would apply to the scenarios and be able to support them with any sort of wider reading. Additional reading, the references again are their Harvard system for referencing. Make sure you are reading what your tasks are asking you. There are 2 tasks, they are both scenarios, and you need to be looking at the learning outcomes based in each task, okay? I'll just go back. So this is the assignment brief available on Moodle for you. So there are 2 recordings of the assignment discussion because I've just had an issue with the internet, just went off. So please refer to both of them. The element of it is that you need to make sure that you are checking your work properly, that you are not plagiarizing your work, you are referencing your work. You have 2 tasks, and the word count is 2,500 for both tasks. Make sure you are referring to that, make sure you reference your work, and make sure if you have any questions or any queries, please email learnerwork@ukvarsity.com, .co.uk, and submission of the assignment is to be done on learnerwork@ukvarsity.co.uk. Assignment submission is 2 weeks after the completion of the unit, which is now complete because we've done learning outcome 1, 2, 3, and 4, which recordings are available, and these recordings will be also available on the assignment discussion. Thank you for today's session, and good luck with getting on with the assignment. Thank you.